My wife came home smelling like a man who didn't belong in my house. The cologne was sharp, expensive, and confident. Nothing like the plain aftershave I had worn for 15 steady years. There were faint purple pressure marks high on her thigh she tried to hide by smoothing down her dress. I didn't ask questions. I didn't raise my voice. I just watched her move through our kitchen like nothing was wrong. 2 weeks later, she announced a peace dinner and invited her ex, Brandon Cole. She also invited his wife, my sister Claire, and Claire's husband Ryan, as if witnesses could make betrayal respectable. By dessert, she slammed her glass down and said, "Say sorry to my ex, or leave my house." The room froze. Brandon smirked. Claire stared downward. Ryan stiffened. I stood slowly, pushed back my chair, and walked toward him with calm steps. "My name is Daniel Hayes. I own a small restoration company in Lowell, Massachusetts, fixing flood damage, fire scars, and broken kitchens across our quiet county. Honest work builds patience, and patience reveals patterns." 4 months, Lauren had been changing in small, careful ways. Her phone stayed face down at dinner. Meetings stretched past midnight. Conference trips expanded mysteriously by extra days. Restaurant charges appeared in cities never mentioned at home. Once, I found a valet receipt from Harborview Suites tucked inside her planner. She blamed clerical mistakes and laughed it off smoothly. I didn't confront her. I observed. Contractors know that rushing demolition creates deeper cracks. So I waited and documented everything quietly. Tuesdays became strategy sessions. Thursdays turned into networking events. Weekends featured training seminars. And always, the same cologne followed her home. I wasn't angry. I was preparing for clarity. The night of the dinner felt staged from the beginning. Lauren wore the blue dress she hadn't chosen for me in years. Brandon arrived confident, shaking my hand like we were business associates closing a deal. His wife Melissa smiled politely but watched every movement closely. Claire avoided Ryan's eyes, gripping her napkin too tightly. Conversation stayed surface level at first. Weather, work, politics, until Lauren steered it toward old grievances. She accused me of holding grudges against Brandon from years ago. Brandon played humble and misunderstood. Then Lauren turned to me, lifted her fork, and said, "Apologize to Brandon for spreading lies. Or leave." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a public command. I stood slowly. I felt no anger, only certainty. I walked around the table and stopped beside Brandon's chair. I looked first at Melissa, then Ryan, then Lauren, and I spoke carefully. "Should I apologize to your wife too, Brandon, for the Harborview Suites receipt with my wife's name and my sister's signature on it?" My voice stayed even, almost gentle. The silence that followed felt heavier than shouting ever could. Brandon's smirk disappeared instantly. Lauren's color drained from her face. Claire inhaled sharply. Melissa calmly reached into her purse and placed her phone in the center of the table. The hotel invoice glowed clearly on the screen. Room 1708, 3 separate weekends, additional guest listed as Claire Hayes. Ryan stared at his wife as if language had left him entirely. Lauren tried to grab the phone, but I slid it back toward Melissa without breaking eye contact. Brandon attempted to laugh it off, but his voice cracked halfway through. Melissa opened another image. Security timestamps matching Lauren's supposed conferences. No one argued anymore. The proof didn't require defense. The unraveling happened in layers. Ryan stood first, pushing his chair back with a harsh scrape. "Claire," he said quietly, "tell me this isn't real." Claire looked at Lauren before answering, and that hesitation answered everything. Brandon turned on Lauren, accusing her of manipulation. Lauren accused me of spying, paranoia, obsession. I remained silent. Evidence speaks clearly without emotion. Melissa explained she had discovered the hotel charges months earlier and waited for confirmation. Ryan removed his wedding ring and set it beside his plate. Claire began crying softly. Brandon grabbed Lauren's arm, then released it when Melissa stepped forward. 3 marriages fractured around one dining table, and the candles kept burning as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Lauren looked at me like I had betrayed her trust. But she had built the stage. I simply turned on the lights and stepped aside. I moved out the next morning while Lauren was at work. I had already prepared quietly over several weeks. Small transfers from our joint account were labeled as equipment purchases and supply expenses. My attorney, Mark Sullivan, had reviewed everything in advance. When Lauren returned home, half the house felt empty. My tools, personal files, inherited furniture, and business records were gone. On the kitchen counter, I left a short note. "You chose. Now live with it." Her messages flooded my phone within hours. Anger, denial, threats, promises. I did not respond. Mark filed divorce paperwork citing misuse of marital funds for extramarital activities. Massachusetts law might not punish infidelity directly, but financial evidence influences outcomes. Meanwhile, Melissa filed her own petition against Brandon. Ryan contacted an attorney that same afternoon. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Preparation had replaced panic, and truth had done its work quietly. By the end of that week, Lowell had already decided what it believed. In small towns, truth travels faster than excuses, and receipts travel fastest of all. Lauren tried controlling the story. She told neighbors I had overreacted, claimed I staged the dinner out of jealousy, hinted that I had been emotionally unstable for months. But people had eyes. They remembered Brandon's car parked outside our house too often. They recalled restaurant sightings and late-night laughter that didn't fit business meetings. Meanwhile, Mark's office formally requested reimbursement for every documented hotel stay and suspicious expense. Melissa forwarded corporate credit card statements to Brandon's employer, triggering a compliance review. Ryan moved out before the weekend ended, refusing to argue with numbers that spoke clearly. I focused on work, finishing a fire restoration job on Elm Street. Stability became my quiet response to chaos. Lauren appeared at my apartment one evening without warning. She stood outside the door in heels that clicked too sharply against concrete steps. When I opened the door, she looked smaller than I remembered. "You destroyed my reputation," she said immediately. I invited her inside but kept distance between us. "Reputations collapse under truth," I answered calmly. She accused me of revenge, humiliation, cruelty. I reminded her she demanded a public apology. I simply delivered public evidence. She insisted the affair meant nothing serious, that Brandon was emotional support during difficult months. I asked her about the 3 separate weekends documented at Harborview. She looked away. Silence filled the apartment. Finally, she asked whether I ever loved her. I told her love without respect becomes obligation. Tears followed, but tears do not erase patterns of deliberate deception repeated again. Brandon confronted me at the Iron Anchor Bar 3 days later. He accused me of sabotaging his career and marriage. I reminded him I had spoken one sentence backed by documentation. Nothing more. He threatened legal action, but his confidence faltered when I mentioned corporate compliance investigators reviewing expense reports. Melissa had provided everything voluntarily. Brandon's anger shifted into quiet panic. Meanwhile, Ryan finalized temporary separation papers and refused Claire's attempts at explanation. Claire moved into our parents' house, avoiding public appearances. Lauren's corporate supervisors scheduled internal interviews regarding potential policy violations. Ethics committees rarely tolerate hypocrisy from compliance officers. Through it all, I maintained routine. Early mornings at job sites. Steady payroll for my crew. Evenings spent reviewing paperwork with Mark. The storm outside did not require me to shout. It required patience, documentation, and distance from emotional debris. 2 months passed before court dates arrived. Brandon lost his position after financial irregularities became official findings. Melissa filed for divorce and retained primary control over shared assets. Ryan pursued permanent separation from Claire, citing breach of trust. Lauren attempted settlement negotiations, offering property concessions in exchange for confidentiality. Mark advised me carefully. We accepted reasonable division of assets but refused to sign any clause that misrepresented documented facts. During mediation, Lauren asked quietly whether exposing everything had truly been necessary. I answered honestly that I had not exposed anything publicly. I had simply answered her demand with evidence. She looked tired, less polished, less certain. The image she valued most had eroded under scrutiny. I felt no satisfaction watching it happen. I felt relief that performance no longer dictated daily life inside my home. On the final day of hearings, Lauren sat across from me without hostility. Just exhaustion. We built 12 years, she said softly. Was none of it real? I considered the question carefully before answering. It was real until honesty stopped being required, I replied. She asked if I would ever forgive her. I said forgiveness and reconciliation are different things. I might forgive eventually, but I would not rebuild on the same foundation. She nodded slowly, understanding at last that preparation had not been cruelty. It had been clarity. Outside the courthouse, autumn wind moved through Lowell streets with quiet indifference. 3 marriages had ended because truth arrived in one room at the correct moment. I did not feel victorious. I felt steady. Stability after deception is not dramatic. It is calm and unremarkable, like clean air after smoke. Months later, I still live above the hardware store downtown. The apartment is modest, but it carries no hidden tension. Work remains consistent. My crew trusts me. Clients recommend my company because reliability matters more than appearance. Lauren kept the house she once called hers, though neighbors say it feels empty now. Brandon relocated to another state. Melissa rebuilt quietly. Ryan focused on family and distance. Claire continues learning that choices echo longer than excuses. Sometimes people ask whether I regret speaking that sentence at dinner. I do not. Silence would have preserved comfort temporarily, but it would have prolonged decay. When Lauren demanded I apologize or leave, she expected submission. Instead, she received precision. I did not destroy anything that was healthy. I revealed fractures already present. In the end, I did not lose everything. I lost illusion. What remained was integrity.